everybody. It's episode 112 of Recotopia. Today's big recommend is The Death of Stalin. I'm Chris Atkinson, joined by Aaron Dicer.
Heidely hosts and arenos.
And Jeremy Scott.
Yo!
Yo. And once again, chat out there watching us on a Tuesday, talk about movies. Thank you so much for coming out here. Does anybody want to start us off with some small recommends?
I have a very large small recommend. I've already raved on Twitter. If you follow me there, you are not surprised to hear me recommend the show Fallout on Amazon Prime. On Twitter last night, I think I described this as a tornado in a phone booth. You just hold on and hope, and boy, did I enjoy that ride. This is based on a video game series. They are, from what I understand, I've never played them, RPG games, role-playing games, essentially, where you can build up your character's stats and gear and whatnot as you roam around a post-nuclear wasteland. And what I think this show has done that is going to start being copied everywhere is that it is not adapting any of the games. It is telling a new story within the world of the games. And to hear people who play the games tell it, it is nailing the tone. And the tone is why I love this show, because that is the most unique and refreshing thing about it. It is at one moment shockingly, disgustingly violent, and in the next moment, hilarious in unexpected ways. Sometimes the shocking, disgusting violence is what's hilarious. What I really want to do, I'm not going to do it. What I really want to do is just start rattling off Walton Goggins quotes from this show, because that's half the reason I laugh out loud every episode is something that he says. But I want everybody who watches it to experience that character fresh and on their own without being spoiled. I don't want to tell you really anything about this show. I mean, I do. I desperately do. I'll talk with Aaron about it after we've wrapped the show. But one other thing to entice you is this show has about 5 or 6 guest stars that are only in a single episode, but still make a huge impact over the whole series. It's wild. Michael Emerson, I'm going to forget names. The guy from Saturday Night Live, Chris Parnell, Portlandia.
2 guys from Saturday Night Live, because Fred Armisen is in there as well.
Fred Armisen, I called him Portlandia. Michael Rappaport, Unexpected. Go ahead.
Eric Estrada shows up.
Eric Estrada.
Eric freaking Estrada shows up.
It's amazing. I really, really love the show, but it is shockingly violent. But what they've done, the way they've ended it, classic Jonathan Nolan. This is the guy who ran Westworld, and so we finished the season with plenty of satisfying answers, but lots of enticing questions. And this feels like a show that could go for 10 years and still be surprising me. I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, I agree. I'll throw my hat into that recommendation ring as well. This is a lot of fun, just laugh out loud moments. And I had the privilege of watching it with one of my sons who's played a lot of the games. So every once in a while, we'd pause it and he'd tell me like, oh, this is the gas station, from the game, and this thing happened here, and, this is what this dog means to the game players, and like, all this kind of stuff. And little winks and nods. But I do want to say, if you've never played the game, because I guess I should technically have played like 15 minutes of Fallout 4, I think, just when I was messing around with some PlayStation stuff. But I haven't really played the games, but I loved it too. And Jeremy, I know you haven't played the game. So right. I just think that tone is that there's an aw shucksness to like some of the characters, like this naivete that they have in this world, and then that is the counterpunch to it is the violence and the depravity and those kind of things. And so those two things, like hand in hand, you'd think would be a tough thing to balance out, but the show does it really, really well. And Ella Purnell is, I love her. She's so good in this show. And it's great casting all around. The guy who plays Maximus is so funny.
Oh my
so
gosh.
perfect. It's just an entertaining show, man. Like I could have watched another 8 episodes. Like it's just so entertaining.
Yeah.
Since I'm going to talk for a really long time during this big recommend, I will go ahead and do the small recommend and break this up because you can't hear my voice for 45 minutes. My small recommend, John Carpenter made 2 movies before Halloween. One is Dark Star, which is it's a really funny, like, independent science fiction movie. Another one is Assault on Precinct 13, which came out in 1976, and it was remade in 2005. But this one it's about a gang who a lot of the gang members get shot by cops, and then the next morning are basically on with a blood feud against cops and maybe the town itself, for all I know. But they go out and they want to terrorize the city, and so in the meantime we have an old precinct that is moving buildings. It's going from one to another, but it still kind of serves as a headquarters while it's getting moved over. And we have a guy who's just recently been promoted to lieutenant who's been sent to be in charge of this precinct while all the stuff gets moved out and before the lights go out. But this gang goes out and they kill this ice cream man. I don't know if there was any reason for killing the ice cream man, and there's a shocking death where they shoot this little girl too on screen. And the father who's been in a phone booth the whole time while this has been going on notices that his daughter is dead. And the ice cream man's like, I got a gun in my truck if you want to use that. And instead of calling the police, which, there's a phone booth right there, this guy goes on a vigilante justice mission against the gang members who did it. And of course that he goes and he's successful in killing one of the gang members, which means all the gang members want to come after him, after this father now. And the father, of course, finds the old precinct that's having stuff moved out of it as the place where he hides. And then all the gang members start to assault the precinct of the title. And so it says precinct 13, but I swore I saw the number 12 on that building. Anyway, this is a very, very simple action movie. I love it when action movies keep things like in a small space for a while, because they have very limited resources in which to fight this gang off. And they have to use their wits basically to try to win and everything while they're trapped inside and the gang is outside. So very fun movie. John Carpenter, man, there was a period of time that man could do no wrong. I feel like nearly everything he came out with was quality. So I recommend this one.
I need to see this. I've only seen the Ethan Hawke remake, which I don't think got great reviews. And by the time I got to it, I was like, oh, it's better than I expected. But
the remake is actually pretty decent. So
I watched this and loved it. This is just like you said, a straight action film with no let up. Like it doesn't have a lot of the spacing that a lot of modern movies do, and I think the movie is better for it. I was in from the second they killed the girl from Escape to Witch Mountain, who was like, look, you're going to kill my childhood crush. I'm in. Like, I want these guys dead,
Yeah, like, exactly,
right? So yeah, no, this was a lot of fun. I'm glad to have seen it. Carpenter's got skills, man.
Yeah, man. No doubt.
I will take us into... we're just going back in time. We're just continuing back in time, 30 years at a pop, apparently. I'm going back to 1946 with A Matter of Life and Death. I have been trying to catch some of the Criterion movies that are going off the channel this month, and this was one of the higher rated ones that was going off. It stars David Niven as a pilot during World War II who is captaining a plane. He has all his people bail out, and there's one person who's dying there. He stays with the dying person until they die, and then he doesn't have a parachute. He jumps out of his plane without a parachute. Before he does that, he makes contact with this girl named June at the tower, And they have this really, really great, very well written conversation about, what he has to do, and she doesn't want him to do it. And so they kind of have this connection that happens right before he jumps out of the plane. And he jumps out of the plane without a parachute. And then we see him on the beach. And then basically the rest of the movie is us trying to figure out if he survived that jump, or if this is some sort of manifestation of, imagination or whatever. We have scenes in heaven. We have like courtroom trial scenes in heaven about him and his ability to be there or not. There's some It's a Wonderful Life kind of feel to it in some ways. And it's hard to explain how fantastical this movie is and how well the movie pulls it off for being, 80 years ago now that this movie was made. There's also this really interesting element where the movie gives you the opportunity to both see everything as scientifically rational, or to decide that maybe there's some mystery here, maybe there's something else. And I love that the movie gives you that choice and lets you buy in to either of those things by the end. And it kind of leaves it a little bit, just enough open-ended that you could see either as a possibility. This is a really interesting, thought-provoking movie that gave me a lot of good feels and had a lot of great dialogue, as a lot of those older movies do. So
I think one of my favorite things about the Criterion stuff is how dumb it makes me feel for not ever having heard of most of the movies on its list.
Yeah, that's very true.
I'd never heard of this. I'd never heard of this till I saw it.
I'm saying I'd never heard of this movie in my entire life, and you're making me want to bump it up my list pretty high.
I really, really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorites that I've seen. So yeah, it's a matter of life and death.
All right. Okay, on to our big recommend, which is The Death of Stalin from 2017. It's Armando Iannucci's. It's another, political thing, but it's way different from his In the Loop or Veep or anything like that. Although it has some of the same, there are some of the same rhythms of comedy in there. It's very dark. This is the darkest thing that he's probably ever been involved with. I wrote notes down for this movie, and I had to cut about half of them because there's not a scene in this movie where something isn't happening. And I had to kind of make a judgment call on what I was going to talk about when it comes to the main story. So hopefully I didn't cut out stuff and then completely start talking about stuff out of context here. But here we go. The movie starts in Moscow in 1953 at a concert hall. The text on screen tells us that Stalin's NKVD has been up to some evil shit for 20 years, terrorizing people that are on a list. Two men are listening to the beautiful music in a booth, but that's interrupted by a terrible telephone ring. One of the men, director Andreev, played by Patty Considine, hey, shout out to Hot Fuzz, is given very confusing directions to call a number back in 17 minutes. We later find out it's Stalin, who is asking for recording of the concert well after that isn't possible anymore. Knowing it doesn't matter one way or another because he'll be killed if he doesn't, this leads to Andreev trying to keep the orchestra after the show and filling empty seats with common people off the street. And I love the common people that come in to watch this concert. It's so awesome. We are introduced to Stalin, played by Adrian McLaughlin, and the extremely evil head of the NKVD, Lavrentiy Beria, played by Simon Russell Beale. Also, the first secretary of the Moscow Committee, Nikita Khrushchev, played by Steve Buscemi. Stalin's deputy George Malenkov, played by Jeffrey Tambor, and Foreign Secretary Molotov, played by Michael Palin. It's the scenes with these men in power that provide the movie's most extremely dark humor. Beria gives the orders to the NKVD, and it's here where the movie shows you that while the interactions between the people of power are darkly humorous, there is an ongoing campaign of terror where no one is safe. The movie decides not to be in the least funny in these situations, which gives the humor in the movie an even darker tone than usual if you've got that as a backdrop. Back at Stalin's house, we find out that Molotov is on the list to be killed. Then the concert gets recorded. Andreev gives the NKVD the record, and Maria, the piano player, played by Olga Korolenko, I believe she's the only Russian adjacent actor in this movie. She is from the Ukraine, and I love her. I wish she was in more stuff. She is very pretty, yes, but I think she's great in this movie. Wants to give them a note. She wants to give them a note denouncing Stalin, which is stuck in the record sleeve. And Stalin gets the record, starts playing it, and the note falls out. He reads it, and he thinks the note is hilarious. But then he starts choking, and his guards hear something, but they've been told not to interrupt him, so they don't, out of fear. He isn't found until the next morning. He's lying on the ground in his own pee. He's basically dead, but not all the way dead. We don't really know the status of his dead or alive, but he's, for all intents and purposes, dead. Beria is the first to hear about it, and you can see him, his wheels are turning the entire movie. He sees an opportunity. He starts laying the foundation so that he can maybe take power if Stalin dies. So then we have Georgie, who is the deputy. He's going to take power during the transition, but he's a weak and incompetent man, and played by Jeffrey Tambor perfectly. He calls Stalin irreplaceable, but as soon as he says he's taking power, Beria tells him that he just said Stalin was irreplaceable. So how can he possibly say something like that out loud? Georgie then covers his ass by saying his power, as it were, is to get the committee together and decide what to do. So Georgie wants to call a doctor, but we find out that most of the good doctors have been executed for treason, and that Georgie was the main guy who found evidence that they were trying to poison Stalin. So they don't have any good doctors to choose from, even because of the society in which they live. We get introduced to 3 more secretaries and ministers. Lazar Kaganovich, geez, these Russian names, Minister of Labor, Anastas Miroykin, Minister of Trade, and Nicholas Bulganin, Minister of Defense. Everybody gathers around and picks Stalin up and takes him to a bed. They call on someone who names names in the past to find all the remaining doctors in the city. The scheming starts, and this is where it starts to get very Game of Thrones, and it's basically Khrushchev versus Beria. And Beria has been on the move. He's already had a huge head start on this. Beria has an advantage because he's the head of the NKVD, but Khrushchev has some strings he can pull too. Both of them are looking for support where they can, but Beria is looking for it everywhere. He wants everybody on his side, or at least trying to get everybody on his side. So that means doing anything that he can to placate people. So so when Stalin's daughter Svetlana shows up, played by Andrea Riseborough, both Khrushchev and Beria want to curry her favor because they want to get everybody on their side. And then we cut over to Vasily, who's played by Rupert Friend, Stalin's son, who is trying to put together a hockey team because the one they had died in a plane crash, and Vasily wants to keep that under wraps. Vasily, he's basically running amateurs out there and basically just telling them, hey, hit the puck. Hey, just shoot it. Or that's coaching to him. Vasily is an alcoholic, and he has no control over what he says or does, but luckily he's very weak. The doctors come to a conclusion. The doctors that they hire, basically the scraps from the street, they come to the conclusion that Stalin had a cerebral hemorrhage. They don't think he'll recover. Beria then has NKVD replacing the army everywhere. And yeah, that's the weird thing. The NKVD is like an internal affairs division. They're like the they're like the cops, but they have, they kind of replace the army when they can, I guess, but they're the enforcers. They're the assholes of this movie. Barry has the NKVD replacing the army everywhere. And then, but then there's a very brief instance where Stalin comes back to consciousness and then promptly, officially dies right after that. Beria makes a stop at a gulag to free Molotov's wife, who everyone thought was dead. And this is a clear ploy to get Molotov's favor, because he is also trying to curry favor with all the people in the committee as well. So he's trying to get So he thinks that bringing Molotov's wife back will help him get Molotov's vote. And Molotov is a party man, but he's got a lot of conflicts with this because his wife was sent to death, and he is adamant that she deserved it. And then and so like he will always say stuff like, I loved her, but yeah, she deserved this. It's a really weird position that he's put in all of this. So they tell him that Stalin and Beria put Molotov. Khrushchev tells Molotov that they put him on a list. So Khrushchev's trying to recruit Molotov in all of this. But not Molotov figures there was a reason, and he isn't mad about it. He's even when he's put on a list, he's just like, there must have been a big reason. And Khrushchev's like, no, of course there's not a reason.
He says, like, I must have offended him so badly or something like that.
Yes. Beria shows up before they see Molotov's wife is alive. They talk about how traitorous she was until she magically appears, and they decide that the evidence against her was flimsy. Malenkov, who's Georgi Malenkov's role is that mainly he just wants to look good. He wants to take a picture with a little girl like Stalin did that made him look human. He's having paintings made of him. Beria tries to win his favor by freezing arrests because there's a sort of an idea that, hey, maybe all this fascism we're doing isn't a good idea. There's a worry that Stalin wouldn't have been in favor of this, but they reason because Stalin himself destroyed the status quo, they can do the same thing because his ideas were both radical and popular and somehow liberal. So everybody meets. Everyone is being assigned to their roles. They decide to make Khrushchev the director of Stalin's funeral. Beria wants to let some prisoners go, but some of the committee thinks that will make Stalin look bad. Beria's idea is to say they were misled about those people, and the people who misled them should be responsible. Khrushchev has hired a funeral director that reminds me a little bit of Martin Short's wedding planner in The Father of the Bride. Now Jason Isaacs appears as Field Marshal Zhukov, head of the army. His performance is scene stealing. This is something I didn't think I'd ever seen Jason Isaacs like this before. Before this, he is hilarious in this movie. Zhukov is pissed that the NKVD has replaced his men everywhere, setting up where his allegiance will lie later. Zhukov is worried about all the people who will be flooding Moscow to see Stalin's funeral, but Beria has stopped the trains going into the city. This is a massive conflict because the people deserve to see Stalin. Beria temporarily prevents that. Vitaly runs into the funeral drunk, and Zhukov has to punch him. Vitaly wants to make a speech at his father's funeral, which nobody wants because they don't think he'll be able to do it without embarrassing everyone. But the very weak Georgi Malenkov allows it. Molotov asked Beria why he invited the bishops. Yeah, there was a thing about inviting the bishops in here, and it's again just showing how Beria is trying to curry favor with everybody, even those who've been kicked out, basically, of having any influence in Russia whatsoever. So Molotov asked Beria why he invited the bishops, and Beria shames him because he accused his blameless wife of treason and finds a way to back him into a corner by telling him he must always toe the party line, whatever it may currently be. Molotov's wife's guilt is a thing of the past and therefore isn't the party line anymore. And Beria is using a lot of, like, exactly as Steve Buscemi says it, using a lot of wordplay here to make it seem like Molotov is on the wrong side here, and that Beria's always got the right side involved here. Beria also shows the dirt he has on Khrushchev. He can make it seem like he's been sleeping with the piano player Maria, who gave Stalin the note. And so Khrushchev now notices that, you know what, if I keep letting Beria do all these moves, he's going to probably I'm going to probably end up dead, and there's no way that I'm going to have to start doing some stuff. So Khrushchev secretly takes control of the trains using the army, and he wants the people to be able to come to Moscow. But, and I'm pretty sure Khrushchev plans for this, a lot of these people find themselves running into the NKVD when they get there, causing massive death. I'm pretty sure he knows this is what's going to happen, and he can blame Beria for it since he is the head of the NKVD. Khrushchev gets Zhukov on his side when he hears about the mass death that the NKVD caused. Khrushchev gets right to the point, blame Beria. The plan is to kill Beria on the day of the funeral, since most of the army will be in town on that day. Beria realizes that he's going to get the blame for the deaths, and he threatens everyone with blackmail, which does him no favors. Molotov takes a secret meeting with Khrushchev. I love the secret meeting, by the way, because he comes in saying, "You're a murderer," to Khrushchev, and then he gets in a car, and to protect what they're saying so nobody can hear them, he has a dog start yapping in the back seat while he tells Khrushchev that I'm on your side. I want to get Beria killed and blah blah blah. But Molotov, who can be annoying, insists that it has to be unanimous. So that means getting everybody, including that weak-ass Georgy Malenkov, on board. Khrushchev tries to recruit Malenkov during the funeral, and Khrushchev lies to everyone that he got his approval, knowing he's going to get it one way or another because Malenkov eventually caves to everything. During the speeches, the Red Army goes to work with setting up Beria's capture and death. Afterwards, in committee, Khrushchev accuses Beria of crimes and signals the army to come in. They take him into a bathroom to officially arrest him. Khrushchev eventually bullies Malenkov into believing this is the right thing to do. They do a trial in a garage. He's being accused of being a traitor, but hey, if that doesn't seem convincing enough, how about the fact that this guy is a rapist and he assaulted girls as young as 7? They certainly didn't care about that before, but now they're willing to kill him over it. It's just adding charges so that it doesn't look like, they're doing some trumped up charges. This is something we can actually get you for. He's shot on the way out of the garage. Then they burn his body. Khrushchev, clearly in charge now, assures Svetlana she will be safe, along with Vasily. He no longer cares about currying favor with her anymore because he definitely has power now. She's going to be sent to Vienna while Vasily is kept prisoner in the Soviet Union. The end of the movie shows that Khrushchev has become the new general secretary while the Central Committee has taken control of the country, only for him to demote key members 3 years later. Eventually, Leonid Brezhnev would wrest control from him in 1964, seen behind Khrushchev and looking down at him at a concert as the movie ends. What did you guys think of the death of Stalin?
The movie or his death itself? No movie has ever made me think of Sting lyrics more than this one, because he's got that song, If the Russians Love Their Children Too, and he wrote it during the Cold War. And he's got a line that says, "Mr. Khrushchev says we will bury you. I don't subscribe to that point of view." So every time they said Khrushchev in this movie, I'm singing that Sting song in my head. I love it so much. This is the first time watching it that it kind of scared me. And I don't think the movie is really even trying to shy away from the fact that this is probably still going on in places all around the world. But this is my first viewing post all my exposure to Navalny, for example. So watching the documentary, seeing him poisoned, sent to a gulag, and then dead. And then this is the first time watching this movie with that real life information in my head. So there were moments here that I've laughed in the past where I was like, I don't even know if I want to laugh at that. That's actually horrifying. Like, for instance, the torture facility, the gulag or whatever. The first time I watched this movie, I was laughing at the fact that while they're walking through the halls, having their conversations, off camera, people are constantly getting executed. Like, it's just commonplace. And I think it's okay to laugh. But this time through, I didn't laugh at that because it felt more scary. And I do think the movie is trying to get you uncomfortable in many of these scenes. I think my very favorite scene is the funeral where they play telephone and Khrushchev eventually says, "Let's switch places. We'll make it look like part of the ceremony." And he does this slow thing where he's eventually standing in front of Georgie, and Georgie's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he slowly goes back to his other spot. There's
It's
so
good.
much. There's so much humor in this that has nothing to do with the actual topic. It's just humanity being weird. And I think Buscemi steals the movie for me. Everybody's great. Everybody's really well cast. Tambor is amazing, but it's Buscemi, I think. Ultimately, I feel like he's our protagonist. If we have one in this story, somebody who we're mainly following through their experiences. So many good lines. I couldn't write them down. I particularly like the line in that scene where he says, I'm going to give everybody in the Red Square a voucher permitting one kick to his stupid face. And then later on, Barry is like, did he say something about such and such? And the guy's like, no, he said something much more complicated about a voucher system.
Yes.
Yeah, I love all the stuff that this guy's made. In the Loop and Veep, like you said, this is clearly the darkest. But yeah, I mean, I do think there's going to come a day where it'll be hard for me to laugh at this movie.
Yep.
And maybe that was the point. Maybe he even made this knowing it was going to change over the years.
It's kind of one of the beautiful things about satire is that it uses humor to be able to take you to really dark places, right? So the humor almost allows it to go places other movies couldn't go without just turning people off or feeling, so, the satire of after they have, cleared out the residence of all the workers or whatever, and, they're shooting some of them and they're sending others. And then as the truck's pulling away, the one guard just turns to the other and shoots that guy. And it's like, that's how casual things are. Or you're in the execution yard where he's like, stop the executions. And he shoots one more person. And then it lingers on the next person in line who's like, I guess I'm free now. He just got his life back. Like, it's able to do those things because it couches it in humor, and so I think that's the a feature, not a bug. Like, I think that's the what it's supposed to be able to do, and I think this movie does it really well. I was pumped to watch this. Extremely excited afterwards. I don't know if I've mentioned on the show. I think I've mentioned to you guys that I'm going to see Dr. Strangelove when it comes out in London, and Armando Iannucci is the one that adapted the Kubrick movie. So Iannucci's Strangelove is going to be so much fun. I think Steve Coogan, I think, is starring in that. So I'm
the fuck?
Right?
I don't have any interest in flying over an ocean, but I'm instantly insanely jealous. What the hell?
Yeah,
I didn't even know this project existed.
Yeah, so
amazing.
So yeah, that's going to be opening while we're over there, and so I'm excited to check that out. Already have tickets and everything. And this movie made me more excited because he is so sharp. He's so smart about the way he's underlying these things. He's so smart about the humor, even the background humor. I think of moments like I don't think we've talked a lot about the opening symphony other than through the plot synopsis, but that is so indicative of life in a dictatorship when it's just like the simplest things mean you die. And so everybody, like, he even says to the crowd something along the lines of, don't worry, nobody's going to get killed, I promise you. He says, this is just a musical emergency. And it's like, everyone there knows, like, actually some people might get killed. This is the country we live in.
That happens a couple of times in this movie, by the way, where people are getting chased down for various things, and there's like the threat of other people getting killed in the background. So they're like, of course they think they're gonna die too.
Yeah. There's somebody, they're talking about people left, so they're trying to fill, like you said, with out people from the outside, including somebody who brought in their own pickled eggs, apparently, which is amazing. But then they're like, get bigger people. And, because they'll help the acoustic, and then just somebody off screen says, I can get my wife, she'd deaden the acoustic. Like, this is just like this throwaway drive-by of this guy's wife. Just like the humor is so on point. There's another scene that really stood out to me this time with the cars, when he's like, they're carting him away, and then somebody gets out to, you know, pay respects, and they're all like, oh, I got to pay respects. And so they all go pay respects, but then they all want to be the first there. So then they all rush back to their cars and get going. It's just, everybody is so on edge about everything. I also like that Khrushchev's wife is kind of the brain of that couple. Like, she's taking notes on what kind of jokes that Stalin thinks are funny. Yeah. And I think it's, you know, at the end there are two, you know, cool things going on. And one of them is that, whoever, the name slips my, was it Brezhnev that was next? Whoever is like sitting behind him, like eyeing him, like next in line kind of thing. And then, but also his wife is sitting there with him, and she's very pleased with herself because this has kind of been her project. Like, she, you know, she is kind of the force behind him. And I like that the movie kind of deals on that. Some of the trivia is really interesting. I like that Inucci thought there were some things that were too insane to include that were true in history. Like the Jason Isaacs character apparently had twice that many medals, and he was like, that's too many medals. Like, we can't go with that many medals.
That's amazing.
The other example was that musical thing, that concert thing actually happened, and in the real life version, they had to go through 3 conductors because the second one was drunk. So like he was like, well, that's just too unrealistic. Let's just do the 2. And so I thought that was really cool. I think Jason Isaacs steals the show. I think he's so good. I think it's interesting that the movie makes this choice to have everybody use their normal accents, whether it's American or British or what kind of British. And Jason Isaacs is the only one doing a specific accent that isn't his own because of what that accent means. So like, he picked this, this was in the trivia as well, Yorkshire accent, because they were the bluntest people he knows. So it cracks me up. Nobody's doing a Russian accent, but Jason Isaacs is like, I'm going to do a Yorkshire accent because those people are blunt, and it works. It's perfect for that character. That accent works perfectly for that character. Yeah, this movie's great. I really, really enjoyed watching it again and picking up on those little details. So yeah, this is a good one.
2 moments I wanted to make sure I talked about that made me laugh out loud was when they're having the discussion about doctors. And they're explaining all the doctors are either executed or in a gulag. So none of the doctors in Moscow are good. And this one guy comes from the back and goes, what is everyone's thoughts on getting a bad doctor? And they immediately shout him down like, no, we can't do that. Just the delivery there killed me. And then later on, when Vasily is being held on the ground and he tries to spit on the guy that's holding him down, and his spittle just goes up and bloops back down on his own forehead. And I don't know how much takes they had to do to get that right, but I love that Vasily doesn't even know physics at all. Like, he's like, I can do this. I'm going to spit on your face. And he ends up with spit on his own face. I was dying. And I've only seen that guy in Homeland. So that was a little bit of a weird juxtaposition.
Which guy?
For me. Rupert
Friend?
Yeah, Rupert Friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aaron, you talk about the English accents thing. I believe the first time I heard about this was when Chernobyl came out. They did the same thing with Chernobyl. Yeah. And then the people who made Chernobyl said, this was a plan from the movie Citizen X that came out. These are all stories about like something that happening in Russia. And they have English actors for the most part doing the stuff. And they said, just go ahead and do your accent, because one thing that we find out is that when you try to do that Russian accent, like the John Malkovich thing or whatever, then it just gets too distracting after a while. Just go ahead and nobody cares. Just use your regular accent.
You're speaking in English. Like, what's the difference? We already know you're not actually Russian. You're speaking in English.
Well, and that's the thing. This movie doesn't work if they're speaking in Russian, does it? And the movie doesn't work if it's not Buscemi and people like that saying that you cast Buscemi because he's perfect for that role. And yet, if you have him speak another language or an accent, then it pulls you out of it completely.
So there's a few other things I want to bring up. Just some lines. I had cut out a whole bunch of stuff from the plot and everything, but go over a few of the things that I noted on here. I love it when Andreev tells the other guy in the booth to stop eating apples. He's always eating apples, and I took this as a reference to us, even though it probably isn't. I thought that was fun. Yeah. I the when the conductor faints and hits the fire pail, so when they need a new conductor and they go to these apartments or whatever to find another conductor, the guy finds them and he says, "You are our finest and nearest conductor." Let's see. So Khrushchev is running with Kaganovich. This is why after they've had this plot in the woods and they see Biera doing the same, and so like they see Svetlana show up and they start running, and he starts explaining his vision to the Soviet Union, and he goes, "How can you run and plot at the same time?" Let's see. Oh, another one is right after that. The McCoyan guy tells Khrushchev that he saw him in the woods whispering with one of the big boys, but then says, "There's bears in there. Better watch your stepson." And Khrushchev, thinking he's being metaphorical, says, "There's bears inside Stalin's house too." And McCoyan says, which suggests he really was talking about actual bears in the woods. It was not being metaphorical whatsoever. Let's see. What else do we have on here? Oh, Beria noticing Malenkov is wearing a girdle, and then he makes that joke about unloosening the corset later on in the meeting, basically to chide Malenkov. I love how Molotov manages to both praise Stalin and go against him, and he keeps going back and forth when they're taking that vote, and people keep on like they're about to raise their hand, and then he's but on the other hand, and they keep taking their hands down, and then they finally decide to release the prisoners and everything by the end of it. You guys mentioned the guy who gets shot just before they have the announcement about freeing the prisoners. It's like he looks down at the last guy just knowing how lucky he is. Let's see. Oh yeah, Svetlana asked Barry to bring a dear friend named Alexei back because he thought he brought Molotov's life back so he can do the impossible. And Alexei was actually killed. It doesn't matter to Svetlana. She apparently thinks this can be done. This is the kind of world they live in. People they didn't lie about Molotov's wife dying. They couldn't have possibly just had her in a gulag this whole time. So there's a lot of there's a lot of things that are not jokey that I think are really good observations. Like, so Svetlana makes that observation when he sees all these people coming in to see Stalin, and she's like, "You mean they came here? They weren't made to do this?" He says it's there are people who actually love this man, but the problem is they know how bad he is. Like, all these people in power know how bad Stalin is, but the people, the common citizens, a lot of them don't. They believe in the bullshit, and they're coming to pay their respects. So just a few things there that I wanted to mention on that. There's a lot, like Jeremy said, there's a lot of great lines in this that are just too hard to keep up with. I also like the part where Khrushchev comes out after talking to Maria, the piano player, and so those two guys are like, working on your fingering, and the guy's like, yeah, it's like, bet she holds one note really long or something like that, and he goes, two fucking clowns, one fucking joke, get some new material. I'm glad I revisited this because I had forgotten quite a bit of it since the last time I watched it. I think I saw it when it came out, or I think it was a streamer that came out. It was released on streaming, wasn't it? I don't know if it even came out in theaters.
It did. It made 400 and I saw it. I think it came out in theaters somewhere.
Oh, so it briefly came out in theaters.
Yeah.
Okay. It's time for our super secret double feature, I believe.
What do you think, Jeremy? You want me to go first?
It made $26 million.
Oh,
That's not bad.
Really?
24.6. Sorry.
Oh, well, that's much worse.
Yes, that's much worse. I'll go first.
Okay.
I think this is one where there's a more limited pool, but you tend to surprise me. Dr. Strangelove is obviously an easy go-to that I considered, 5 minutes into this movie, but I don't like to do the easy go-to. But I do feel like we have to have some measure of political manipulation and personal pursuits. I have two options. I'm going to give one, and after Aaron's, I'll give my other if it's not his. I'm going with a movie I don't even like, and that's Vice, with Christian Bale playing Dick Cheney and manipulating a dumber superior with President Bush. I feel like that really mirrors the Beria-Georgie relationship. It's not going to be as funny, but I do think it is a good counterpoint to show that kind of self-serving behavior happens in politics in probably every single country and place in the world. But again, mostly going for that Beria-Georgie kind of relationship and who's really pulling the string kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
I like
I'm going with Vice.
I like it.
Nice. I'm going on the nose. Sometimes I just have to. I think this is just too perfect not to. I'm going with The Great Dictator. Charlie Chaplin. It's very, very similar. Like we're dealing again with a dictator. It's right there in the title. We're dealing with the satirical elevating of that situation so that you can laugh at the things that would usually make you cry. And this is in the moment he's doing this stuff. That's the other thing to remember about The Great Dictator is like this was very, very fresh, just happened when this movie came out. It's also a Chaplin movie with sound, which, is not necessarily the norm. He was a silent film star first. And he's really, really good in it. I think it's one of his best. So, and he directed it, which is worth mentioning as well. So, Great Dictator, I think, would be a great
What year was this?
It was like 1944 or something, right?
Yeah, it was right
there
around
in the middle.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that had happened.
Oh,
right
no,
then.
it was 1940. It was
even before then. Even before then.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is like in the moment courage. Like it's wild.
I have a friend who's a huge Charlie Chaplin fan who, no, I don't think he listens to this podcast, but he would be very mad at me that I didn't know that 1940 was the year. That's how much of a Chaplin fan he is. He's an asshole. All right. It's Aaron's turn for next week. What will be our homework for next week, Aaron?
Jeremy, did you want to mention your other one, at least in passing? You said you had
I
mention.
really thought for a long time about going with Jon Stewart's Irresistible. That
sure.
Yeah. With Steve Carell basically manipulating an entire town that has the most ridiculous ending of any movie ever made.
Yes, it does.
I recently found out that you guys hadn't done this movie, and it blew my mind. I thought for sure I'd miss my chance to talk about this movie with you guys. We are going to do quiz show next week.
Yeah.
Wow.
One of my favorite movies of all time. For a long time, it was in my top 5. It's still like number 6 in my greatest movies of all time, or my favorite movies of all time, I should say. Wow. I just love this movie. Love this movie.
I'm so glad you're getting this in before I go away for a few months. Because I would be legitimately bummed not to be able to discuss this with you are two people in the world that love this movie as much as I do. I don't know anyone that loves it as much as the three of us do. So it'll be fun going back to this. I haven't seen it in probably 4 or 5 years. It does look like we may have to rent this one. I'm not sure it's on any streaming services for free, from what my quick Googling tells me. But
that is possible.
I'm excited to watch.
Hey, don't treat me like I'm some member of your goddamn fan club. You tell me that everybody got the answers but you?
Yeah, talking about accents that are distracting.
Oh, yeah.
Or amazing.
Or amazing.
Yeah, could be too. Could be that too. Could be that too. Yeah, I love Quiz Show. I've probably seen it probably more than 20 times easily. So, I think we have time for some questions.
Any questions? All right, let's get to a couple of these bad boys here. Movie villain that steals the show from the movie's hero, acting wise.
Ricardo Montalban in The Wrath of Khan steals the show.
Frickin'
Like, it feels like maybe for the first time ever. Now, I didn't watch the full original series or anything, but it really does feel like for the first time there's an actor in a Star Trek that is taking this seriously. Like, I mean, he's seriously, but he still has enough of like a humor to him in all of this. He's not taking it like that seriously, but he's making that villain count in Wrath of Khan. So I think that's the reason why that one's always cited as the best Star Trek, because of him, even though I like 6 better, but 2 is of course excellent.
There's the Seinfeld that references Wrath of Khan was just on the other day, where Kramer's like, now Jerry will tell you Wrath of Khan is the better picture, but search for Spock is that, and then at the end we're just frustrated about something and he goes, Khan! The chat is telling me that Quiz Show is on Hoopla in the U.S.
Oh, nice.
For those of you that don't want to pay to rent it. Yeah. Go ahead, Aaron.
I went with Philip Seymour Hoffman in Mission Impossible 3. He's so good in that movie. It makes the movie in a lot of ways.
You threw me off the plane.
I'm gonna hurt her.
I'm gonna hurt her. Yeah, he's so good. So I had to go with Philip Seymour Hoffman.
That's all. I mean, he makes. I honestly listen. 2 is so bad that 3 becomes this refreshing thing.
Right.
But I don't think that it's a great movie. I don't personally think it's a great movie, but he makes it. He elevates it with that performance. I went with Hugo Weaving in The Matrix. Because I feel like after that first movie, people were. I mean, he was one of the things people were most. Him, Trinity, and Morpheus. Like Neo is Keanu, and we love Neo. Neo's great. He has some great moments later on in the series, but here he's not supposed to be this dynamic, energetic figure, and Hugo Weaving just chews the shit out of that first movie. Sure in the chat, we got any good answers?
Let's see. Jeremy Irons in The Lion King, Alan Rickman in Die Hard. I would also include in the Die Hard series Jeremy Irons and Die Hard with a Hannibal Lecter and Silence of the Lambs. Keith David and The Princess and the Frog. Man, I haven't seen that movie in forever, so I don't even know if that's trolling or not. But that's a good one. Gary Oldman in Air Force One. John Malkovich in The Line of Fire is another good one, and Frank Langella in Masters of the Universe.
Nice.
I think we have room for one more.
Let's do one more. Some movies about sports are sports movies, but some movies about sports are actually comedies or dramas that just happen to have sports elements in them. What is a movie right on the line that you are insistent belongs in one category or the other?
I think Moneyball is a straightforward drama. It doesn't have much to do with baseball, really, even though there's a lot of baseball in it. It's more about surviving in a world where your peers have a huge advantage over you, and you need to find value where others don't. And so yeah, that's one that you could easily just say, oh, that's a baseball movie, but it's really about running an organization more than anything.
It's really about being a manager.
Yeah. People.
I like that. Aaron?
Yeah. We'll keep it in baseball. This is, in my life, the most sportiest sports movie to ever sport that isn't really a sports movie, and that's For Love of the Game. This is a romance. This is, in my mind, more of a romance than a baseball movie, even though The Perfect Game plays such a crucial role in the movie. Even that game is almost a metaphor, is played that way. So yeah, this is really a romance.
If it wasn't for like Nolan Ryan and Roger Clemens, we wouldn't even buy that movie. We wouldn't take it seriously. We would be like, that old man can't throw a perfect game.
Well, honestly, I didn't take it that seriously, even with Roger Clemens and Nolan Ryan existing. And that's an interesting one, right? Is Sam Raimi did that movie so that he'd do Spider-Man, so he could do Spider-Man.
Yeah,
basically. So this is an interesting one.
Yeah, go
that's
Tigers.
a fair trade. I'll take that trade. I'm glad we got Spider-Man. I will always claim that Field of Dreams is a baseball movie, even though I will admit it probably is just a drama about a midlife crisis that has some fantasy elements in it. There's very, very little actual baseball in the movie, but like Moneyball, I would probably say Moneyball is a baseball movie, even though Chris's point is absolutely correct. I think there's just some kind of magic that those of us who grew up watching baseball, Field of Dreams taps into those magical moments when your team does something unexpectedly good. So yeah, I recognize Field of Dreams probably not a true sports movie, but
not especially, but yeah. I think all of them you could. I think this is the point of this question. All of them you could probably say are baseball movies if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But in our little world, maybe not so much a baseball movie. In the comments, we have let's see, A League of Their Own. Yeah, I would say so. That's a good one. It's amazing how many times baseball kind of shows up in this.
Yeah.
We have one a vote for Basketball, by the way, runs the line of sports movie and comedy. The sport, of course, of basketball is silly and ridiculous and is really not like it's not really a sport at all. It makes no sense whatsoever. That was a movie that I considered making one of my 90s comedies, but I wasn't sure the tolerance level people would have for basketball. So I was kind of on the fence about making that the 90s comedy. The Wrestler, yes, of course, is just a drama. So good. Happy Gilmore. We have some votes for Happy Gilmore in there. It's not a sports movie. So there you go. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming out, chat. Love you guys for coming out here and listening and watching to us and everything. Next week is quiz show. I can't wait to watch this movie again. This movie is so good, so good. It's worth getting a subscription to something or paying for it or whatever, but to watch it. However you want to watch it, it's going to be good. But that's going to do it for this week. We'll see you next time. See you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.